Hi, everybody, and welcome back for another David Vance podcast show. Thank you so much for watching this wherever you are, whether you're in Rumble or Getter or YouTube or X or wherever it is. Anyway, listen, thanks for coming along and joining me. Got a great guest tonight, and I think a really interesting topic that I think is well worth discussion. So, first of all, let me bring my guest in. His name is John Hannam. Hi there, John.
Hi, David. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all good. I'm all good. I mean, I've got hope in my heart. Have you got hope in your heart?
I'll do
Because
my best. I'll do my best. It's a bit hot, to be honest, to open too much.
I'm not. It's amazing. We're going to talk obviously about the whole Andy Burnham thing,
Sure.
basically. But we're being absolutely besieged by sound bites, aren't we? The hope in your heart. Growth in economic growth in every postcode? I mean, it's all so calculated, isn't it?
Well, it's all based on, as you say, it's based on sound bites. It's hope,
Mm,
and you know what it is. I think what they've seen is that for the last 2 years, the Labour reputation, the government reputation, Keir Starmer's reputation has been absolutely destroyed. And
mm.
so what they're trying to do is just do everything they possibly can to turn that around and try and put a smile on everyone's faces. But as you say, it seems completely calculated and it seems very fake a lot of the time as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But that's a really good point that you started with there, John. You see, Stormer got in, as we all know, at the end of July, in July 2024, and almost instantly it went off the cliff because it was obvious that him and the likes of Rachel Reeves, they just couldn't sync with the British people, which was evident after obviously Southport. But and the ratings all crashed. And so the thing about it is, it struck me was that happened. Obviously, the wheels came off in 2024. 2025 is a nightmare for them, really, really bad. Question: do you think that along that 2025 journey, before we've even got into 2026, do you think somewhere within Labour there was moves afoot to change things, because they were obviously heading for, which we saw this year, electoral annihilation?
Yeah, I mean, I think they saw probably within a year or so of taking power.
Mm,
I mean, it started off with the heating allowance for pensioners, didn't it? Which was within a couple of weeks of them coming into power, and the wheels fell
yeah,
off pretty quickly.
yeah,
And then it
yeah.
just continued to go downhill from there. And Starmer became a little bit of a sort of a laughing stock. And I would imagine that the powers that be within the Labour Party, whether that's in the NEC or whether it's the Fabian Society or whatever it
Yeah.
might have been, probably
Yeah.
looked at that and thought, this can't continue. And they probably decided, well, we'll give it another 6 to 9 months to see whether
Mm,
it can be turned around, whether we can sort of change the narrative a little bit. But if we can't, then we need to get someone lined up to replace him. And I would imagine that the jockeying behind the scenes as to who that might be. And they probably looked at Starmer, who, whether you like him, whether you dislike him, whether you think he's a good politician or a bad politician, from a presentation point of view, he was so robotic with that sort of
yeah.
nasal voice, very, very hard to warm to. So I
Mm.
suspect what they did is decided, well, we need the opposite to that. We need someone who's got a little bit of charisma, got a smiley face, and can be the opposite to what Starmer is. And they probably stuck their hand in a little pocket of names, and out came Andy Burnham.
Yeah, you could almost imagine the meeting, couldn't you? In the meeting room. Let's put up on the chart here. Let's what have we got? What do we need?
Yeah.
And Burnham seems to be what they decided is what they needed. I mean, the whole Makerfield thing. If we move into 2026, like that became almost like a presidential election. I mean, reform were not even sniffing it. Nobody was. It was essentially a coronation for Burnham, don't you think?
Well, what's weird is that normally by-elections come about because either somebody has failed and has therefore been elbowed and got the sack, or because
Yeah.
somebody unfortunately has been taken ill,
Right.
or has got
Yeah.
something going on in their personal life and they
Yeah.
stand aside. That this is the only by-election that I can remember. There may be others that I can remember where somebody specifically stood down with the only reason behind that being to allow somebody else to jump into his seat. And Josh Simon, who was the MP, wasn't doing anything wrong. He was doing a decent job as an MP. He had been elected by the local Makerfield constituents, and then he decided, no, I'm going to step aside to allow Burnham to take that job. So it was very much a coronation. And then lo and behold, Josh Scheinman has been rewarded for his efforts. But I think he's got like 180 grand job in Downing Street as one of the senior advisors, isn't he? So
Yeah.
it pays to be loyal, I guess.
You know, all's well that ends well in the court of King Andy, it seems. But yeah, you're right. I mean, and the thing about Burnham as well is he actually increased Labour's share of the vote. I think it went from 44% in 2024 to over 53%. So he increased, which is very unusual in a by-election, but he did. And so it's like British politics has been reset, John, and we're being given this story. Oh well, you know, Andy, he's come back from Manchester to save the UK, and he's very organic. He's very natural, very natural. Nothing's very normal, isn't he? Really, really normal guy. He just does normal things like you and me, and I think it's all fake. Every aspect of it.
I
This
totally
guy
agree.
isn't.
And to be honest, I'm stunned that people seem, I mean, like, he's had quite a big bounce in the polls. I think Labour are back up to 25-ish
Yeah.
percent. They're sort of neck and neck with Reform. And his popularity ratings, everyone seems to be falling for it. And yet, I'll be honest, I didn't know a huge amount about him until the last sort of few weeks. I knew obviously he'd been in politics back under Gordon Brown. He was a cabinet minister then. I knew he'd been mayor of Manchester for the last sort of decade or so. But as
Mhm.
a person, I'd not seen much of him.
No.
And he does come across as this likable, affable northern bloke.
Yeah.
But the more I see him, particularly when he does speeches, it looks so scripted, so pre-prepared. This whole sort of normalness seems to be an act. It seems to be fake. And I don't know whether I'm the only one who feels that way, but clearly a lot of the public don't, and a lot of the public are buying into it.
Well, they've gone out of their way to present him as an ordinary bloke. I mean, he
Yeah,
wears a black t-shirt. What else could be more normal than that? And there's this clip I want to play, John. We've talked about it before.
yeah.
And again, I mean, he's ordinary. He goes out for a run. It's all natural, right? Let's watch this together. Hang on, if it plays. Totally natural. Just, you know,
Totally
anytime I
stage
go,
managed, isn't it?
I mean, honest to
You
God.
know what it reminded me of? I did a video this morning. What it reminded me of when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, they presented him as being this sort of bumbling, affable,
Yeah,
likable fella wearing the scruffy t-shirts and the dodgy beanie hats and all that sort of stuff. And they'd get
yeah,
him going out on his bike and going
yeah,
out
but
running,
yeah,
etc., etc.
yeah,
When in reality, and I didn't dislike Boris that much, but in reality, he was Eton educated, came from a super privileged background, had been born in the USA. The image that was presented of him wasn't
yeah.
the reality of the image. And that, I think, is exactly what's happening here with Burnham. As you say, they present him as this normal northern bloke that spends plenty of time in the pub, drinks pints, goes out for a run every morning, but it's completely curated. It's completely created.
Well, it is. Did you see the video that he put out, John, with John Healey,
Yes.
the new chancellor, and at the bar rating pub snacks? I mean, cynical or what? I mean, that's and yet it was well done, you know. So now we know he prefers pork scratchings
Yeah.
over scampi fries. We know that. Not too sure about what his views are when it comes to, you know, Islam, mass migration, stuff like that. But he
All
definitely
the important
prefers.
stuff.
Yeah. We know, you know, but it's just. I mean, they've been very good at it, don't you think, in the past week, pumping out these sort of catchy little clips. And as I say, him and the chancellor being in the pub, just as you do, rating pub snacks. I've never seen that from Labour before.
No. I think what will be interesting is to see how long they can continue this for. As you
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
how long are they going to be able to put out little clips and little snaps of him being an ordinary guy, which is what I'm called, and a normal bloke, without actually giving any real detail on policy. All he keeps
mhm,
saying is, as you say, we want to give people hope. We want to make every postcode successful. We want to create
yeah,
growth. But
yeah,
actually,
yeah.
behind that, at some point, you have to have some policy detail. We want to create hope by doing this. We want to make the economy grow by doing this. And all you get is the headline and no substance behind it. And that's fine because we're only 2 weeks in. But
Mm.
once you get to 2 months in or 6 months in, people surely are going to want to start to see a little bit more than that.
Uh, I talked about John Healey, the Chancellor, the new Chancellor. And I have had a theory put to me that John Healey, of course, was the guy who basically stabbed Stormer in the back by resigning when he was Defence Secretary over the defence budget. Do you think Healey was part of the grand scheme to unseat Stormer? And because he's been given the next biggest job in the country. I mean, Chancellor is next biggest to Prime Minister. And it seemed a bit strange, but nonetheless, that's who he is now.
The thing is, you don't know what to believe, do you? Because it would
No.
make sense if actually that was part of the pre-planning and that was part of the deal. Well, you resign, you drop Starmer deep in it, and then your reward for doing that will be to get the top job. What's going to be interesting is that Healey resigned on the face of it because he was unhappy with the funding for the new
Yeah.
defence plans, and now he's the guy in charge of the money. So is he
Yeah.
going to suddenly stump up the money that he was unhappy about not getting before? Or is he
Mm.
still going to tighten the purse strings even further and not fund the military properly? Because if he doesn't fund it now, he's going to be seen as a complete hypocrite because he resigned on the back of the funding being too low and then he won't sign off on it himself. So that puts him in a bit of a tricky situation.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I mean, the other thing that struck me is, I don't know what you felt about this, but, Stormer kept making these noises about he's going to be there to 2029. He'd fight to the last for his role as Prime Minister. And at the end, John, he just rolled over.
Yeah.
Like, he rolled over. What I thought about that was, is that the kind of hidden power of the establishment coming down against on Stormer? Even though he fronted it up, they were basically saying to him, "You got to go now, pal, because we've got somebody better to shift in." What do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? There's, I suppose, two ways of looking at it. As you say, was it sort of the powers that be above him saying, "Well, no, your time is up, mate. You've done your job. You've got to go," or was it him personally sort of smelling the coffee and thinking, "I've got that. What's the point of standing again? I'm going to get
Well,
absolutely smashed here. I might as well leave with some dignity." You've also got Wes Streeting as well, because Wes Streeting sort of even before John Healey was coming out and saying he wasn't happy with things, he was hinting that he was going to run for leadership, that he was going to be
yeah,
a rival, that he would definitely stand. And then all of a sudden, he doesn't stand either.
yeah.
He stands aside. And weirdly enough, he gets rewarded with John Healey's job, which is the defence job, which is probably a little bit of a poison chalice at the moment because our defence is in an absolute mess. So
Mm.
him standing aside doesn't seem to have been rewarded. It seems to have been stitched up.
And what do you think about people, like other people that suddenly have come right now to the heart of British politics under Burnham? Angela Rayner, she's come back. Ironically, almost like a national humiliation, she's in charge of housing. Couldn't make these.
That's the. I mean, she was the housing minister before. She quit as the housing minister
Yeah.
because of her own financial shenanigans around housing, and then gets put back in charge of housing. I mean, you couldn't make it up, could you?
That's a real weird one. And then the one that's even more weird than that, John, is Louise Hay, I think she's called,
Yeah.
who's now the first cabinet secretary. She's the one that had to resign from Stormer over that unfortunate fraud conviction. As you go, and now she is probably of central significance to this government, a convicted fraudster. Just find
Seems
it.
to be that loyalty is rewarded more than honesty, and if
Yeah,
you're loyal to and that probably was always the case. If you go back
true.
in history, if you were loyal to the king and did the king's bidding, then you got given positions
Mm,
of power, and that's the
mm,
same now. Being
mm.
honest, being upfront, having ethics and morals doesn't seem to get you very far in modern politics, and it probably never did.
That's a fair point, actually. It is a fair point. I mean, but the thing about it is, as you just said, John, like it's all very well to stick out these little sort of snazzy sound bites about, we're going to cap the bus fares at £2, or we're going to no VAT from next April on pubs, clubs, and event places. But someone has to pay for it. Like the money Andy doesn't have a magic money tree, much as he may seem. And how do you think he's going to square that? Because Stormer couldn't. If you remember, Stormer tried to get 5 billion in
Yep.
savings, and they were going to lynch him, so he abandoned that. How do you think Burnham can do it? Do you think there's more
I
of a
think he's
goodwill?
stuffed, to be honest, and I don't see how they're going to get out of it because the welfare issue and the welfare bill is the big issue in this country. I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
immigration is a massive issue, cost of living, the economy generally,
yeah,
growth. But the
yeah.
welfare bill, I think I read, is our welfare bill already exceeds our total income tax receipts. Doesn't
Yep,
include
does.
other taxes like stamp
Yeah.
duty and et cetera, et cetera. But income tax alone is now exceeded by the welfare bill. And that welfare bill, I believe, even by the end of this parliament, by 2029, is due to grow by roughly another 50 billion quid. We
Hmm.
already have a national debt of some approaching very close to 3 trillion. Our national debt interest payments alone, I think, are about 110, 115 billion pounds every single year. So the finances are completely out of control. And the only two
Hmm.
things you can do to remedy
Hmm.
that is you've either got to get growth to take off and rocket propel, or you've got to cut your spending massively. Well, the Labour MPs won't allow him to cut spending. Where are they going to cut it from? There's, as you
Uh,
say, they tried
yeah,
to cut a measly £5 billion off of it, and they all lost their minds and
they
wouldn't let him
did.
do it.
Yeah.
So where's he going to find the money? And it, because we need to get growth at the moment, he's ticking along at sort of about point 0.2, point 0.3 per
Yeah,
quarter.
at best.
It needs to
Yeah.
be 2.5% a year, but that
Mm.
hasn't been done for the last 15, 20 years by any government. So how is he going to do that? Because if not, we're just going to get more and more and more in debt. Taxes are going to get higher and higher and higher. I think taxes are already 38, 39% of overall GDP, which is the highest they've ever been in
Mm.
history. So you can't squeeze people anymore. Will he go down the road that the Greens are saying, which is just attacking the super rich and attacking the billionaires and going for a wealth tax? But even that is only going to bring in a limited amount.
Yeah, well, it is a conundrum because as you said, there is this huge welfare issue that faces the nation, and I can't see myself how he does that. What I do think is, I think the Labour backbenchers are going to, over the next 6 months, maybe a bit longer, will they'll give him a bit of space, I think, and he might get more sort of movement from them, let's say, than Starmer could have. But in the final analysis, you mentioned economic growth. I mean, I think Andy's going to tax us more. Pretty clear in that. And if you tax more, you don't get economic growth. It's a
No.
kind of no-brainer unless you're a socialist.
Yeah, I mean, there comes a point where there isn't any more to squeeze out of the orange. I mean, I think we're at that point at the moment. All the juice is gone, and now you're just going to get left with pips, which is a bit of a
Mm.
dodgy analogy, but you get my point. And
Yeah, no.
the more eventually, the more you tax, you just drive people either to hide their money, to stop bothering, or to go offshore. And I'm a working class guy, and it used to be that you'd get people that were wealthy thinking, "Is it worth it in the UK anymore? Let's go and live somewhere sunny."
Mm.
I know lots of people that are working class, middle class, that are in that sort of 40 to 80K a year
Yeah,
bracket, which is probably the bulk, who are now thinking, what's the point? We can't
yeah.
make it work here. We're paying too much tax. The cost of living is going through the roof. Where can we go? And so many people are looking to leave the country. So many people are looking for an escape route. And if that happens, particularly in large numbers, then you've got a load of immigrants coming in who are, generally speaking, low skilled, low wage, who are not going to fuel growth. And you've got the people that do earn money all buggering off to go somewhere else. And that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, but that does seem to be where we're going, doesn't it? I mean, that I don't think by any means that's implausible. We have seen an exodus of certainly, let's say, the super wealthy. A lot of them have gone. I think we've lost more millionaires than any other
Yeah.
G7 nation or G20 nation. But just ordinary folks, as you say, I mean, you don't have to be a millionaire. But if you're working hard and you're bringing in, like you say, John, let's say 60 grand a year, for
Yeah.
example, you're going to be screwed so hard, like you really are. And sensible people make decisions based on that. And therefore,
Absolutely.
I don't see, John, where he get how can he get economic growth? I mean, the Stormer talked about AI is going to give us economic growth. We've got the highest cost per unit of electric of any country in the civilized world. No one's going to build data centers in the UK if they're sane. So I
But
just don't see.
even if you do build data centers, they are so electricity and water hungry. And yet at the
Yeah,
moment we've got a drought and a hosepipe ban. So where's that water going to come from? And
that's fair.
our electricity costs are the highest in the industrialized world. So
Yeah.
how that's going to promote growth, I don't know. All it's going to do is drain ever more resources. It might create some jobs, but it's not going to
Yeah.
actually do the country any good.
Whenever Labour talk about job creation, I always think they mean public sector job creation. I don't think their minds jump. It's
Absolutely.
not really private sector. I think they mean, well, if we can create more civil servants, more mandarins, more NHS, more, whatever, pick your part of the public sector. I think they mean that. I think that's what Stormer meant during his couple of years. I don't see much of a change there, but that doesn't deliver economic growth because it's the private sector that funds the public
I
sector.
don't think they have a clue about private sector working people,
Mm,
particularly the self-employed, particularly the sole trader, the small limited company. I mean, they're bringing in new rules now around making tax digital, whereby sole traders and partnerships and stuff are going to have to declare their tax and pay their tax on a monthly basis. I mean,
yeah.
that's insane. That's just such a huge extra workload. But it also means that if you do some work and you invoice someone and they pay you in 2 months or 3 months and you haven't
Yeah.
had the money, you've still got to
Yeah.
pay the tax in advance of even
Yeah.
getting the receipts in. It's going to
Yeah.
crucify the small business. It's going to crucify the sole traders, the self-employed. I'm self-employed. I run my own business. I've got a couple of little businesses. And
Mhm.
having to do this on a monthly basis is
Mad.
already causing me to panic. And I would imagine lots and lots and lots of independent small businesses are going to think, well, what's the bloody point of that?
Well, there's another lady who's part of this government, this new government, called Miata Funbula,
Yeah.
who, and she's Putney MP, and if you, I don't know if you've caught up with some of her thinking, like she's a full-on Marxist. I
She's just been
mean,
made energy secretary, isn't she, to replace
I know,
Ed Miliband?
yeah, because
Yeah.
yeah, she was number two to lunatic Miliband, but she's been promoted as well. So I actually think this is going to be a very hard left government.
Yeah.
It's just that Andy's got a smiling northern face, John. That's the only thing I can see.
I think I totally agree. I mean, I did a video a week or so ago about this, and I think this will be the most left wing government we've had in
Mm,
50 odd years. Go right back to sort of the early days of Jim Callaghan and
yeah,
Healy and stuff,
yeah,
which was sort of the 75 through to 79.
yeah.
And that was when you had the crazy sort of taxes. I think taxes were up to 86%, 97% for some
Yes, that's
people,
right. Yep.
and it drove everyone out of the country. Since then, you've had obviously the only Labour governments you've had. You had Blair, and whatever you might think of Blair, he wasn't particularly left wing. He was much more centralist and
Mhm.
globalist, really, in his outlook. You had um, Brown after him, who just followed on really, and was much more of a sort of an accountant, really. He wasn't particularly far left. And then we've had Starmer. And again, whatever you think of Starmer, good, bad, or indifferent, he wasn't really a radical lefty. He was more of a sort of a Blairite centrist lefty, if you like. Whereas
Yeah,
Burnham, I think, particularly given the people, as you say, that he's promoted, people like Miliband, Van Bula,
yeah.
um, Angela Rayner, it's clear that he's going to lurch leftwards. But as you say, he's going to dress that up in a nice black t-shirt and a pint of bitter and some long eyelashes.
Yeah, well, but I think that's exactly where we're headed. I mean, the other thing is we just touched on him there, Ed Miliband, who obviously has been a disaster for the UK as energy secretary. He's now become the foreign secretary. He's
Our
God,
global representative.
he's our global representative. I mean, how do you feel? Does that give you hope in your heart?
I'd be really interested to see his sort of first meeting with the Trump administration and JD
Yeah,
Vance and people like that.
yeah.
I'd love to see how that's going to go down and be a fly on the wall.
Well,
Um,
they actually apparently they warned. It's interesting this. They warned the British government that the British government that the US wouldn't be happy with Ed
yeah,
Miliband, and yet he is. So I mean, does that not speak to the first point you made that this is a much harder left government than people think? They don't see it yet, John, like we do.
absolutely. And I think that's why I was. There's a bit of me that thinks, although Burnham came out on Sunday morning in his BBC interview and said like he's not minded to call an early general election, but there is a little bit of me that thinks if this bounce in the polls continues
Yeah,
and things are looking good in the next 6 to 9 months, that he might be tempted to go for an election. Because I think as time goes on, I think as you start to get a year, 18 months, 2 years into his prime ministership, I think people are going to recognize that actually it is all smoke and mirrors and that they are quite hard left
yeah.
and that actually the economy is not growing, taxes are still going up. And I think the wheels might start to fall off a little bit again. So although he's denying it at the moment, it wouldn't surprise me if he tried to go for a relatively quick election, probably early next year sometime or springtime maybe.
Yeah, see that's what worries me. I think the most likely scenario would be a May election
Yeah,
in 2027, which would be the time of the next local councils and stuff.
yeah,
He could do that, and the bounce might last that long because if the budget, a lot of it will come to the budget. I think it'll be interesting to see the sort of things that Healy, allegedly comes up with. But if it's not too severe and the bounce continues, then he could go for the jugular. And I don't think the forces of the right have got their act together yet. I don't think that, reform of all kinds of problems with Nigel and Clacton
yeah.
and, the Conservatives and stuff don't really seem to be able to go. So I'd be worried that he strikes hard, and it doesn't matter what he said on Sunday. That's just sound. That's just a noise. And we could then have 5 years of a hard left, a real hard left government, and we'd be trapped.
I think, I've said numerous times on lots of videos, I think the next election, whenever that happens, is probably the most important
Mm-hmm.
in living memory. I think
Mm-hmm.
if the left win again, particularly if it's relatively hard left, this country is in
Yeah.
deep
Great.
trouble.
Yeah.
And I think what you're going to, I think worryingly, I think what happened in Makerfield is interesting because you said right at the beginning about Labour increasing their vote. I think the reason for that is because the Greens and the Lib Dems didn't really campaign.
Correct.
And I think
Correct.
all of those parties, the voters for those parties, effectively lent their vote to Labour simply to defeat Reform. I think they thought Reform were a real threat, that they had a real chance of winning the seat, and it was very much an anything but Nigel vote. And I think that's what would happen in lots of places at a general election as well.
I agree.
Um,
I totally agree, John. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so that's a concern.
Yeah. Yeah. That does worry me. I think the left are able to vote more and operate more tactically than the right. I mean, I don't have any particular flesh in the fight, whether it's Reform or Restore or Conservative. I can see the strengths and minuses to all of them,
Yeah.
but ultimately, all that matters is, you either win or you don't. Like, do you know what I mean? If you losing and having 5 years of what we might get is very problematical. You talk about the wheels coming off Burnham. He gave an interview, I think it was the day before, was it yesterday or the day before? And as part of that interview, he was asked, I think unscripted, about immigration. The one thing he defo didn't want to chat about. And his answer was very weak, very waffly. It hadn't been scripted. And I thought to myself, is this what, Andy's going to be okay as long as it's been scripted and he's rehearsed it. When he has to talk on a tough topic like immigration, I thought he sounded pathetic on it. What did you think?
Well, he hasn't really, although he's done a couple of set piece interviews now, I would imagine that those set piece interviews, although they're not scripted, they probably flesh out, okay, these are the topics we're going to discuss beforehand. So he's got time to sort of think and prepare. What he hasn't done yet, which he has refused to do, is take open questions in an open forum where journalists can just stand up and throw questions. He hasn't done that once yet. In fact, when he did his launch, I think he let in Bolton, he legged it out the side door and refused to take any questions from journalists. And I think you're absolutely right. I think if he can stay on script and be scripted, I think he comes across quite well.
I agree.
Under pressure on topics that he doesn't want to discuss, I think he's in trouble. I mean, in terms of immigration, they spent the first 10, 12 days of him being the Prime Minister of absolutely avoiding that like the plague. And then they sort of couldn't, because I think over the last week, I think about 900 arrivals came in. And I talked about this morning. I think so far today, we've had 700 today alone, and the numbers are going up. Now, if that continues over the course of the rest of this week and the coming weeks, and you're getting thousands per week, then he's in trouble. Because the only thing he did come out and say, I think yesterday, was, well, he's got confidence in the arrangements that they've put in place, that the numbers are coming down, the relationship with the French is working, etc., etc. And he's been able to say that because the numbers are down this year. But if they suddenly start taking off and going up again, then he's got a real problem.
Yeah, I mean, he expressed his confidence in Shabana Mahmood, and the plan is working. But the plan isn't working if the numbers. So I didn't realize there were 700 came in
today alone. Yeah,
today, and there, as you said, there was, and then we saw the big super dinghy as well with 166. Right. I mean, that's like an EasyJet plane arriving.
65 people on one boat.
Yeah.
That's not a small boat anymore, is it?
I mean, they may as well hire ferries and take them across the channel, as far as I can see, because the numbers are and like what I thought was so weird at the very beginning. The number one issue for most Brits is really immigration. I think a lot of concerns about that across the spectrum, and yet Burnham pops up and he starts talking about bus fares. I mean, what? Who was saying the thing I'm really worried about is bus fare? That £3 a killer for me.
But the ironic thing is, it was £2 to start with.
It
They
was.
then put it up to
It
£3
was.
and then cut it back to where it was to start with. So it's not actually a cut. It's just going back to where it was when they took power anyway.
Correct. Yeah, I wish people would remember. That's a really good point, John. Labour put the cap to £3,
Yeah.
and now Andy's boasting because
It's like what they're doing with electricity, isn't it? And sort of cutting VAT on electricity, which I think it was £45 a year. It's going to save most people.
Yes.
That would be great if it was saving you £45, but actually, in reality, the price cap is going up again in October, and it's forecast to go up about £100. So you're still going to be £55 worse off.
Yeah,
it means nothing.
But you said earlier, it's great. It's very true. So much politics is smoke and mirrors, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's like we can analyze it, in the way that we do. But the average punter out there, I think they're busy. They've got busy lives, doing this, that, and the other, and a lot of it passes them by. They just pick up the vibe, and it's and that's what worries me. They'll pick up this vibe from Burnham enough over the next 9 months, I think. Unless the opposition can get the measure of him. I mean, obviously, Kemi Badenoch, I think she had got towards the end. Starmer, she got the measure of him, and Farage was been pretty effective as well. Certainly Farage at the moment is all caught up in Clacton, so it's reform seem to be going through a dodgy patch. And Badenoch, she had her victory up in Aberdeen, but the Tories still seem a bit to me, John, like they're on sort of like life support. With the odd moment of life.
Yeah, I think they've stopped the slide. I think they were sort of plummeting to their doom, and I think they've stabilised things, and they have got some good people. Like I'm a big fan of Katie Lamb. I think
she's good. Yeah.
And I think Nick Timothy has been really brave with what he said about Islam and Islamism.
Yeah.
And Badenoch has certainly toughened up. So they've got some good people within the party. I think the problem is that the bulk of the party is still pretty wet and pretty sort of neutral and namby-pamby, and I think Badenoch came out last week or the week before and said that for the next election they will not take any candidates who do not sign up to coming out of the ECHR. So that's quite a firm statement.
Oh, it is.
Basically said, unless you buy into that as a candidate, unless you buy into that as a Conservative, we're not going to put you forward as a candidate. So they do seem to be taking a stronger line. I think the problem the Conservatives have got is that they blew the entire country's trust so badly. It became so disliked that it's going to take a long time to turn that around again. If at all.
I definitely think that as well. Yeah, it's because what was so effective in 2024 was when Starmer just said 14 years, and and Badenoch was part of that 14 years as well. So yeah, it's fascinating to. I mean, the thing about politics is it's always events. There's something coming around the corner. We don't know what it is, John. But would your sort of prognostication be that you reckon that in the near term Burnham will probably keep getting a bit of a bounce and Labour fortunes will improve a bit? Is that broadly where you think it's going to go?
I think he's had the bounce. I don't think it's going to go up a great deal more. Labour won the last election. I think they got 33%.
33, yeah.
But it was the lowest turnout in 100 years. So in reality, I think somebody did the calculations, and what it actually meant was that only 20% of the electorate that had a vote voted Labour. Now they're on about 25% in the polls. I think he might get them up to 27, 28. I don't think they're going to go any higher than that. I think what's changed in politics is that we've gone from being a two-party state to being a 4 or 5-party state.
Yeah.
And therefore, the days of people getting 40% in an election, which you used to, either Tories or Labour, if they got to 40%, they would win the election.
That's right.
That's not going to happen at any time soon. I don't think nobody's going to get anywhere near that. I think 30% now will be the benchmark. I think if you get
Mm.
30%, you'll be the largest party. But because of the way our system works in terms of constituents, whether that means you can form a majority or not, I don't know. So I think we're in for a future of coalitions and deals being done, whether that's a right-wing deal between Reform and the Conservatives, or whether it's a left-wing deal between Labour and the Greens and Lib Dems. I think almost inevitably, I think that's where we're headed at the next election.
I think that's a very fair comment, John. Yeah, I can't see any party getting 40% or anything like it. The interesting thing about Labour is the 33% that they got in 2024. Back in 2019, when Comrade Corbyn stood, he got 32%. Like,
Yeah.
so actually
I think he got
so
32%. I think he actually got more total votes as well.
more
I think
votes
his
and
vote share
30%.
was
Yeah.
higher. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that just demonstrates to me that British politics is the landscape's changing, the dynamics changing. Joe, I mean, that's really, I guess that's what we talk about, all the time. The fact that you can feel it, and things won't be what they were in 2019 or indeed 2024. Whenever we do get an election. I mean, I know it's supposed to be 2029, but like you, I would wonder if I think by 2029 we'll be an economic wasteland. So I can't see how Burnham. I don't want it to be, by the way,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I don't see how we avoid being that. And I don't think he's stupid enough to wait to that. Stormer might have, mind you, but I don't think Burnham's stupid enough to do that. So that would
The
make
thing
me.
is, he has got a couple of decent ideas. Like they announced something yesterday, which, whilst I dislike him and dislike the Labour Party, I actually agree with and I think is a good policy, which is that they're change or want to change the educational system to bring in much more technical and vocational training for kids at
Mhm,
GCSE level. So,
mhm.
because with the best will in the world, probably 30% of kids in school or 40% of kids in school are just not academic. They're never going to be academic. Trying
Yeah,
to get them to do physics and chemistry and biology and geography and history is not going to work. Whereas if you can get them to learn some sort of a trade or some sort of manufacturing skill or engineering skill or something like that, I think it's the way to go, and it will get more youngsters back into work, and ultimately that will trickle into the economy and help the economy. So that's a
yeah.
good policy if they do it, and I agree with it. So
And, and
they may come up with some good stuff.
But yeah, it's almost like a reform policy, isn't it? You could
It is very
imagine
similar.
Nigel Farage announcing that, and everyone would go, "Yeah, that's great." But
Well, the irony about reform is if you actually read some of their policies from a obviously an immigration point of view and a sovereignty point of view and a politics point of view, they're pretty right wing. But a lot of their economic policies are actually, I wouldn't say they're left wing,
no,
but
but
they're
the more,
quite in favour of sort of the working man, the working people. They're sort of Labourite to some extent, and they
yeah,
never get categorised as that, but they actually are quite centrist slash left on a lot of their economic policies.
yeah. Well, I think Nigel Farage, to be fair to him, I think he understands that if you're going to win an election, you have to win from the centre, John. You can't, no matter how much you want really tough policies, and I would like some very tough policies, but I'm realistic enough to know that you'll scare you scare people if you go
You
too.
will, yeah.
Yeah, so you have to be central, and that means in some of the policies, like you're saying, for reform, you've got to be a wee bit center, almost center left,
Yeah.
and Farage, I think, kind of gets that. But when Burnham does something like you've just said with this policy over the teenagers going into the trades, I mean that feels like almost a traditional, authentic Labour policy, which is
Absolutely.
scary.
There's a guy, I don't know if you've ever seen him. There's a guy that I follow who I really like. He's a guy called Paul Embury. He's
I know, Paul. Yeah,
yeah, what a great. I mean, he's an ex-fire brigade, ex-union man,
yeah,
left to the core, but actually very traditional, working class, quite anti-immigration, quite right-wing in some of his policies. And he is what all my family are working class London people. My entire family voted Labour their entire life because that's
yeah.
what you grew up doing
Well, you
as a
did.
working
Yeah.
class family. And Paul Embry, I think, represents the type of Labour that they used to vote for, and the type
Mm.
of Labour that I think probably would still do quite well, but seems to have been abandoned in favour of this sort of globalist,
Yeah.
um, control freakery, totalitarian sort of leftist state. And I don't think they're actually, they called the Labour Party still. I don't think they actually are Labour because I don't think they do anything for the working man or the working person.
No, no. Well, it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. I just wanted, John, bring up bring up. Here's your ex. I know you were hacked, weren't you?
Yeah, I don't know. That might be. Oh no, that is my correct one. Yep, sorry.
That's correct. No, I got the right one. I got the right one. But
Yeah.
but yeah. So I wanted to make sort of just let people know. Look, you can find John's stuff here. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you follow John. I love your content, John. That you put. I mean, the thing is, there's so many great voices around. I mean, it cheers me up that there are other people, because then you think, well, I'm not the only one. There's lots of people see the world as it is, rather than what you might want it to be. And
Yeah,
you're
I
one
think the
of them.
media has evolved, doesn't it? And as you say, there's so many great content creators and providers and independent journalists and independent news people out there.
Mm.
And it gives you a different perspective. And some of them you agree with, some of them you don't agree with, but at least it gives you an alternative viewpoint on things, rather than everything that comes out of sort of the political spectrum, which you just know is curated within an inch of its life.
Yeah, if it's on the BBC, it probably isn't true. But at least here in the independent space, we can actually hopefully get truth out there. John, it's been a real pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for giving up this time. I do appreciate it.
Me on.
No, my pleasure. And listen, folks, that's it from John and myself. Catch you up real soon. But from us, for now, it's goodbye.